This is going to be interesting. Go ahead.
Alrighty then. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who are not familiar with who I am, my name is Maggie Mendoza. I serve as the program manager for the Center for Leadership, Academic, and Student Success. Very, very long name. But for sure, our department is called CLASS. So one of the things that we're trying to do with our department is bring in speakers who have a grit story. So grit is something that we talk about a lot at our campus, but who are also first-generation college students who face several barriers in order to complete college, and who have an interest in kind of giving back to students and sharing their experiences about how they navigated the college process, and then how you all can be successful in college and kind of serve as a way for you to connect with individuals who are professionals as of right now, with either within our college or within our community. So just a little bit about our speaker today. Her name is Laura Cardiel. She serves as the director for governance, equity analytics, and records. Sorry. And she works for Lone Star College System. So a little bit of history for Lone Star College. So we have different campuses, but then the system office is kind of the one who oversees all the different campuses within our system. So we're going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Ms. Cardiel.
Okay. So I'm going to have to talk like this because I'm not close enough to it. I'll use, yeah, let me use that one instead. Nope. Oh, there we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. How are y'all doing today? Good. Thank you all for having me, and thank you, Maggie, and the rest of the class team for inviting me to speak to you all today. First, I'll tell you a little bit about what it is that I do for the system, just so that you all are aware. So, as Maggie said, I have a very long title. I'm the Director of Governance, Equity Analytics, and Records. Now, those are three very separate pieces. The first one is governance, so our governing board policy. All of that, the revisions and everything go through our office, and we're the ones who make sure that all of the campuses are in compliance with different policies that come through. The second piece is the equity analytics, which is new to Lone Star College. Although we are dedicating a lot of time to diversity and equity work here, we've never had an office that was specifically working towards equity initiatives and making sure that all students have equal opportunities to success. And then the third piece is records, which is public records. If you all know, different state agencies are all required to release certain information to the public. So whenever we get requests for those come through our office, and we're the ones who process that and give you the information you need. So I told Maggie that I went through about 10 different versions of this presentation before I actually settled on one, because I have a lot to talk about. I'll start off telling you that I am 26 years old, and I tell you that because when I talk about the cultural confusion piece, I want you all to really understand that all of this happened very quickly. It happened in maybe 22 years instead of 26. So as I'm going through this, the first thing I'm going to do is talk to you all about my background, where I come from, and why I was culturally confused for a long time. And then I'll talk about my career and how I got to where I am today. And then I'll talk about some unanticipated challenges that I know that we all have. So thinking about my cultural background, I will tell you that I do think that I can relate to every single person in this room in some way, shape, or form, because I've lived in many different places. These are just some things that I want you to keep in mind about me as I'm going through this presentation. So the first thing is I am the only child of a single father, not single mother. That's a little bit unique. So think about, whenever you're going through your female-related bodily changes and not having a female figure talk to you about that, but we'll talk about that later too. I am a first-generation college student. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. My dad is originally from Estación Frío in Zacatecas, Mexico. So is anybody from Mexico? Anyone have family from Mexico? Nice, okay. And my family is very, very heavily rooted in Catholic traditions and values. The 4 states that I've lived in are Tennessee, Virginia, California, and right here in Texas. And they are in that order. I attended 9 different schools through college, and I'll go a little bit more into detail about that in a minute. I've lived in a richer household and a poorer household, and I've lived in different types of households, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute as well. So the first state I lived in is Tennessee. Now, when I lived in Tennessee, everything was perfect. I was, like I said, only child of my dad's, and he was very, very fortunate to find a family that lived there in Tennessee that was willing to serve as my sort of babysitting family whenever we lived there. And it was a Caucasian family because Kingsport, Tennessee, today is about 83% Caucasian. So back in the day, I'm sure that percentage was even higher because according to my dad, I was the only Hispanic baby that was born in the hospital the year that I was born. So everyone thought, oh, look, she's such a cute little dark baby. And, you know, I was dark, and that was different to me when he told me about that. In Tennessee, my best friend when I was in kindergarten, her name was Alexia Castle. And she, of course, was from a Caucasian family that were very rich. And just to kind of paint the picture for how rich her family is, for her 5th birthday party, her parents had a limo pick up her and her friends to take to their mansion so that we could all play in their huge 3rd-story attic that's full of every single costume imaginable, almost every single toy you could think of. It looked like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory for toys. It was crazy. Now, that wasn't something that I was used to. I wasn't that rich. We were just pretty well off. If you see up in this picture over here in the corner, you can kind of see all the presents that are in the background. All of those are mine. So I can't complain about my childhood in Tennessee. It was beautiful. I had Barney at my birthday party. That was when I turned 3. So it was really nice. In Virginia, so I went to Chalkley Elementary School in Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia. And this area was largely populated with African-American population, this specific region that we were in. I'm not talking about all of Richmond. I'm talking about the neighborhoods that we lived in. They were heavily populated by African-American families. So this was a really big change for me from Tennessee. However, as kids, I don't think that we really know to see color. So at the time, I didn't think anything of it. This is just all from me reflecting back on my years and my experiences in these different places. So when we lived in Virginia, this was from mid-kindergarten until midway through 3rd grade was when we were in Virginia. And during this time was when we took our first trip down to Mexico so that I could meet my family there. Because prior to this, I had never met any family members since I could talk that were my biological family members. It was always just my dad and it was my babysitting family, the Olingers. So when we went to Mexico, I did not speak any Spanish. I did not know anything about the culture. I didn't know anything about anything that had to do with Mexico. All I knew was that we were going somewhere really far away to visit relatives. So that's actually a picture from that trip. That's my uncle. He'll probably kill me for using that picture. But I had like gum on my arm. And one of the things that I remember about that trip was that I was an outsider because I didn't speak Spanish. And my family gave my dad a really hard time for not teaching me to speak Spanish before learning English. And my dad had a really hard time trying to explain to them why it was important for me to learn English before Spanish. I started kindergarten in Kingsport, Tennessee. I was in school in Richmond, Virginia. Why would he teach me Spanish before he taught me English? And then also he was worried about trying to teach me at the same time. There were little words here and there, mija, flores. You know, he would teach me little words just so that I could start to get familiar with it, I guess. But teaching me Spanish didn't actually happen until I was about 8 years old. California. My proudest and happiest memories were in California. So if you look up here in the top corner, that was my high school. And if you see, there is a gate all around the high school. We lived in San Bernardino, California, and that is in Southern California. It's about 45 minutes away from Los Angeles. And my school looked like a penitentiary. Like, straight up, that's what it looked like. There were gates all over the place that kept us, moving from one section to the other. Not all of us were bad kids, but the majority were into some really bad things. A lot of students were into gangs, and, well, at the time they called them crews. They were crews that they were part of, my cousins included. So at this school, there was a huge issue between African Americans and Latino students. And all of that stemmed from a relationship that went wrong. There was a Latina female who was in a relationship with an African American male. Most of her friends were Latino, most of his friends were African American. So once they split up, something happened, a friend of hers defended her, they got into a fight, and after that, everything was about race. So that just shows you how a really small thing could turn into something really big. And I remember when we were at this school, because like I said, I was part of the nerdy good kids. So we took all the AP classes. We weren't out in the lunch area. We were always eating in a classroom because we were doing homework or doing something nerdy like that. So, but if you watched from the little hill that was at the school where you could see out in the quad area where people ate lunch, you would literally see a mass of African American students on this side, a mass of Latino students on this side. All of a sudden, someone would yell, and everyone would start fighting. It was terrible. We had police that were on the campus all the time, 24/7. As long as students were there, they were there. They were probably there at night too, but I don't know, I didn't monitor that. But they were there all the time, and it took them forever to get that to break up. It was terrible. But also in California was kind of where I had my biggest growing up experience, because I was there for middle school. And in middle school was when I sort of had my little rebel phase that only really lasted a year. But how many of you have had a little rebel? You felt a little rebellious, you didn't listen to your parents, snuck out of the house, maybe underage drinking. Yeah, don't do that. But everybody has their moments, right? So that was when I had mine, was 8th grade. And after that happened, I moved back to San Bernardino, and instead of living with my dad, I was then living with my aunt and uncle and their family. And I was living with this uncle. Oh, the one in the picture earlier that I said is going to kill me if he sees this video with the picture. I lived with him, his wife, and my 3 cousins. So I wasn't living with my dad anymore. I was with them. Now, this man over here in the picture, that was my geography teacher in 10th grade. And he has been my favorite teacher ever since, because there were a couple of times in school where I lost my cool a little bit, but it really wasn't my fault. This kid was like taking pictures of me in PE, and I was like, stop. He didn't listen, and so I just kind of like backhanded him a little bit. And the teacher saw, and he knew that really wasn't characteristic of me, so he called us over, asked what happened, and I told him, and he didn't get me in trouble for it. He just told me, make sure you stay away from him, don't do it again. And he sent the kid to class, and he didn't make a big deal out of it. I always kid with him today whenever I talk to him, and I tell him, you're probably one of the reasons why I didn't end up going to jail, because I feel like had he escalated that, then a label would have been put on me that I was a bad kid or that I did bad things, and then that may have caused me to act out more. So and he caught me a couple of times, and after that time, that was the last time I did it, because after we had class, he sat me down and talked to me about why I couldn't do that and why it was unacceptable and how I was going to ruin my future, and I have a bright future, don't mess it up. So he gave me that whole speech, but I listened. He said it in a way, he conveyed his message in a way that spoke to me. Now this picture right here is really happy, but also kind of sad. So this right here is my cousin Nora. Now when I talked about growing up and not having that female figure that could talk you through things that were going on with you in your life as a female, she was my person. So anything that was going on, it was her. If it was, periods, all of that stuff, she was the one who talked to me about that. Because my family and our culture, like I said, they're all from Mexico, and they don't really open up about things, or, you just kind of figure out on your own, or when they talk to you about it, they kind of beat around the bush. So you kind of understand, but you don't really know what's going to happen. So she was the one who gave me multiple talks about different things in life, and that was my person. And Anna, she's the one over here on the right. Yes. And she's my best friend to this day. She lives in California, and we've been best friends since 9th grade in high school, and she was one of the ones that kept me in check too, because like I said, I had cousins that were part of crews and gangs, and some of them were either fresh out of jail, in jail, or should have been in jail. So I was exposed to a whole lot of that stuff when we lived in San Bernardino. And she was not into any of that at all. And her family was very well-rounded, and she had 2 younger sisters that she took care of, that she helped her family take care of. And so she kind of helped me stay on track and made me keep my focus in school. And now transition to Texas. So the day that I received the news that we were moving to Texas, that was probably the most unhappy day of my life. Oh, and that's why I mentioned that picture was so sad, because that's the last picture we all took together 2 days before I ended up leaving. But the day that I found out I was moving to Texas was also the day that I was accepted into a peer leadership program at the high school, at Pacific High School. And that was a big deal to me, because in that program, you have to let them know that you're interested freshman year. They monitor your progress all sophomore year, so they make sure you don't get in trouble, make sure you do all your work, you're making good grades, you're staying on top of things, you're being a good influence. They check all of that, and then at the end of your sophomore year, they let you know if you made it into the program or not. Well, the day they gave me my letter, my sophomore year, letting me know that I was accepted into the program, was the same day they told me we were moving to Texas. So I was not very happy about that, because I worked really hard. My teacher covered up for a lot of things for me so I wouldn't get in trouble to get into that program. So it was really disappointing. And especially at that time, because after the rebel year in 8th grade, 9th and 10th grade, I worked really hard to redeem myself from all of those bad things that had happened. So it was just kind of a blow to the stomach to know that all of the hard work that I had been doing was going away because we had to move again. But now I'm to the point where I absolutely love Texas, and I don't think I'm ever going to leave here. So here is where I did my 11th and 12th grade year. Now those 2 years were not fun. I went to South Houston High School, and I put prison bars in front of it because that's what it felt like was a prison. The first day that I got there, they actually pulled me out of class and told me that I needed to go home. And their words were, I will never forget, their words were, "You need to call your aunt to come pick you up because you don't belong here." And that was the phrase that they used. I didn't know why. Later on, I found out it was because of the shot records, but just because of the fact that they told me that I didn't belong there, I was already like, no, take me back to California. I don't want to be here. They're already telling me I don't belong here. Let me go home. And but I didn't get to go back to California, obviously. So whenever I finished high school there, I cried so hard my graduation day because I was so glad I was going to get out of that school. The problem with the culture at this school was that it was a lot of Latino students there that felt privileged, but they really weren't, if that makes sense. So they tried to be something that they weren't. They tried to act like they had a lot of money. They wanted to act like they were better than everybody else, or like the ones who didn't have the American Eagle polos, because at this high school, which was another thing I didn't agree with, we had to have a uniform. So we had to wear the polo and either slacks or like the khaki pants. And I hated those clothes. I hated them. So they had this, but I would see people getting picked on and bullied all the time, and we're all supposedly wearing the same thing, but students somehow always find a way to be mean. So whenever students didn't have Hollister, they didn't have American Eagle polos, then they were the ones that were singled out, and they were the ones that were made fun of. So to me, that was just, it was not right. And our family didn't have a whole lot of money at the time. So, I mean, I didn't have the expensive clothes, and I didn't like those brands anyways. And it was ironic because, Hollister and all that stuff, it comes from California. Well, whenever people found out I was from California, they looked at me sideways like I was from another planet. And that was something that I couldn't understand. I didn't know what the negative views were for that. But as soon as the teacher said, "Oh, she's a new student from California," then everybody was just kind of like, "California? What are you doing here?" And then I found out that they had the same reaction whenever new students came from places like Louisiana, or I don't know. We had a couple of students that came from Georgia, and whenever those students came from out of state, I don't know, they had something against non-Texan people. So the culture there was just it wasn't healthy. But when I graduated from there, I ended up going to Sam Houston State, and that was a school that I had been wanting to go to for a really long time because I wanted to be a lawyer, and they have a really strong criminal justice program. I'll talk about that later. So I went to Sam Houston, and when I was there, all of the cultures that I had experienced in the past were all present there at Sam Houston, which was really surprising to me because when I was in high school, everybody would tell me, "Oh, there's a lot of white people up there." And there was, but the culture was different. It was very diverse up there, and I loved that. And not only that, but I was able to kind of make myself fit because since there wasn't a really large population of Hispanics there, the ones who were there actually did things. So one of the ways that I was able to still hold true to my, Latino values was to join a Latin sorority, well, a Latin-based sorority, and that's what that picture is up there in the corner. So these are all ladies that most of them come from a Hispanic background, but not all of them. But the good thing about that was that they're very rooted in their family values, and they value unity and respect for one another, and that was something that was really important to me. So when I met them and joined that group, that was where I was really, really able to kind of find my niche in leadership skills. So I got a lot of really, really good experience out of that. And I love the Astros. Orbit is my new favorite mascot because he's so cute. So these are some of the benefits and the challenges to the multiculturalism that I experienced. One of the benefits is that I can relate to many people. Like I said, I've lived where there's many Caucasians, many African Americans, many Hispanics, many Asians. So it's just, I can relate to you in some way, shape, or form, or I understand where it is that you're coming from. The challenge is that I don't relate enough. So whenever we talk about, like the movie Selena, for example, how the dad in the movie, he talks about how, when you're in America, you're not American enough. When you're in Mexico, you're not Mexican enough. That's how it is because I've experienced so many things. It's like, well, yeah, you kind of get it, but do you really get it? And people kind of look at you sideways like they're not sure if they can trust you or not. Another benefit is I understand multiple languages, and the challenge is that I can switch back and forth between accents. So every other sentence that I say, one might sound a little bit more on the countryside, but then another one I can sound really like I'm from the hood, but then another one I sound just like I'm a Chicana from the barrio. So it really depends, and that's why I say that I'd be really bad for radio because they wouldn't be able to distinguish one voice from the other. Another one is I can see things from different perspectives. And this is what I was talking about being able to understand other people, because I've been able to be friends with people that are from different backgrounds, whether it's economically or culturally. And then the challenge is it's hard to know which set of beliefs to follow. And this one is more geared towards whenever you're making decisions about certain things and moral decisions. For example, like I said, my family is very strong rooted in the Catholic faith, and that wasn't something that my dad and I ever practiced 100%. So I don't know, I know the prayers in Spanish. So if you say the prayers in English, I don't know them in English. I have to say them in Spanish because that's all I know. But I don't know why we say them. I don't know the history behind all of that. I don't know it. So do I go with what my family has sort of just told me, or do I need to go out and do some research, or do I just go by what my instinct is telling me? So it's kind of hard to make those decisions sometimes. Another one is appreciation and willingness to understand others' cultures. I have a love for all people, and I feel like I always try to see the good in people, and if there's something that I don't understand, I seek to understand. I'll ask questions and try to be as respectful as I can be, not knowing what the culture is. One of our friends, oh, he just walked out. Raymond Kraft. Anybody in here know Raymond Kraft? Yes. He was talking to me the other day about how he had a student who was from a different ethnic background than he was, and that he wasn't sure if he could shake her hand or not. And so he was kind of hesitant, and we talked about that and how it's important to ask people questions and to understand where they're coming from and what the significance is to them about their cultural background, so that you're more understanding and you can better work with those people. And then the challenge is being understood by others, because we have a lot of closed-minded people that are both from the same culture as you are or from a different culture. It doesn't matter. People are always going to have trouble understanding you, but you just have to be willing to either open up and help them understand, or just know when you have to walk away. So those were the challenges with the cultural confusion. Now I'll talk a little bit about the career plans that I had and how those totally just got sidetracked. So very early on, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I decided I wanted to be a lawyer when I had those cousins, the ones that were doing bad things that should have been in jail. I knew that they should have been in jail, and somehow they got off the hook, and that's actually how I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a prosecutor, so that people like my cousins and their friends weren't just out roaming the streets freely. So that was how I decided to do that, and then I tricked myself as I was growing up to think that I liked arguing. I tricked myself into that because I don't like to argue. Now, because I wanted to be a lawyer, like I mentioned before, I went to Sam Houston and got a degree in criminal justice, because I'm thinking, okay, if I want to work with criminals, that's the way to go. That's not so much the case. The criminal justice degree is fabulous. You learn a whole lot of things, but most of it is pertaining to law enforcement, working in the prisons, correctional systems, and all of that good stuff. So I have a wealth of knowledge in that area. But I didn't feel like that program had adequately prepared me to take an LSAT, to go to law school, to be able to do all of the rigorous readings of different policies and the laws, and be able to understand them. So I realized that probably my junior year, towards the end of my junior year in college, when I was almost finished with my degree. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? Because I had 1 year left, and I went through all these classes, and I spent all this money, and mind you, I had to get loans. So there was no way that I could let that go to waste. And I felt like it would be a disappointment to my family if I graduated in more than 4 years, which now I know that they wouldn't have cared regardless. But in my mind at that time, I needed to finish on time, and I needed to do something. So I went ahead and I finished out my degree in criminal justice. And luckily, I had acquired, like I said, a lot of leadership skills through the student organizations that I was in. I mentioned the sorority that I joined, but I was also a member of 7 other organizations that were honor societies. And I was in about 4 honor societies and then 3 other just special interest groups. And I held leadership positions in every single organization that I was in at one point or another, or all together at the same time, because I loved it and that was where I thrived. So I think I worked harder to build my leadership skills and to understand working with others and team building than I did in the classroom with criminal justice, because that's you just read a book and answer A, B, C, or D. But with this, I felt like it was a lot more challenging working in the student organizations, and I learned a lot more from those. So mentors were the other piece that helped me kind of decide where I wanted to go. So I was dating a guy who was in a fraternity, and they had an event one day, and their staff their staff organization advisor was there, and he was the assistant director for undergraduate admissions there at Sam Houston. Now, whenever this fraternity had events, I just couldn't handle it, because they were all really obnoxious and rude and just really annoying, and they were drunk half the time. So I just didn't, it just wasn't my scene. But Keith was there. That's the assistant director. And normally what I would do is find the most mature person in the room, and that was who I was talking to the rest of the night, because I can't do it. So I was talking to him. He was asking me, you know, what do you do? And what are you doing when you graduate? Because I had mentioned that I was graduating soon. And I told him about my dilemma with law school. And first he told me a bunch of reasons why, if I really wanted to pursue law school, that there were other means, that I could, you know, study really hard for the LSAT and read different books. And he even made some recommendations, because apparently he had been interested in doing that at one point as well. So he told me about that. But then, because I talked a lot more to him about the student organizations I was in and all of the things that I was doing with those groups. So then he started to probe and ask more questions about what it was that I loved about it, what I didn't like, and ask me why I couldn't just do that for the rest of my life. It was working, you know, with student organizations and helping students to see the benefit of those student organizations. And I thought, you know what, that would be a really awesome opportunity, because the people who were in charge of the organizations at the university, those were my biggest mentors. They were the people that I went to for advice. They were the people, whether it was for school, whether it was for the student orgs, anything, they were the people who I went to. And I thought, you know what, I want to be like this guy. His name is Jarrell Sherman. He was my first boss at Sam Houston. He's wonderful. So, when I talked to him, to Jarrell Sherman, about what I was thinking about doing with working with student organizations and kind of doing what he does, he was all for it. He said, you know, I don't know why you didn't think about this before. I don't know why I didn't think to ask you about it before. So then I'm like, okay, well, how do I get on this path? Well, Keith told me about this online master's program that they have at Sam Houston State for higher education administration, and told me that it would be a good idea for me to apply for that. But I'm thinking, there's no way I'm getting into this program. I have zero experience in anything education or administration or business or anything related. Mine's all criminal justice. But he told me that his bachelor's degree was in criminal justice as well, so that kind of gave me a light at the end of the tunnel. So I applied for the program, and then I applied for a graduate assistantship there in the Office of Greek Life at Sam Houston, and I couldn't get the position if I wasn't a graduate student. So Jarrell Sherman sent an email over to the director of the program and was like, hey, I really want to hire her for this position, but I need to know if she's a graduate student or not, because if not, I can't hire her. I need to move on. Well, about a month later, they were in no rush to let me know if I was in or not. They sent an email and told me I was in the program, and luckily I did very well there. So my first job in higher education was the Greek Life Graduate Assistant, where I worked with student organizations, accreditation packet to make sure that they were doing the things that they needed to do and not just partying all the time. So we had different requirements for community service and leadership programs and all of that. So I oversaw all of that process. My second job, because that was a part-time job, and I lived far away from the campus, so I needed to get something different. I got a full-time job as a financial aid counselor there at Sam Houston State University. It takes a really special person to work in financial aid. Let me tell you, for all you students in here, appreciate your financial aid people, because they work really, really hard to try to get you what you need, and sometimes they really just can't. And if they tell you they can't, believe them, they want to, but they can't. We had 5 financial aid counselors for 20,000 students, and everyone had a different problem. There wasn't a single piece of paper that went in or out that we didn't get to see. There wasn't a single student that went in the office that we didn't get to see. So it's a really tough job. And at that time, my dad he's diabetic, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but he had some challenges with his health. So I moved him in with me at the time, and my boss was not understanding of my need to be with my family. And so that job just was not going to work out for me at all. Then I started pursuing other opportunities in different institutions, and that was when I came across Lone Star College. And my first job was as a program coordinator in outreach and recruitment, and that's actually my team. That was my very first team here at Lone Star College. They're all amazing. And I loved that job. I coordinated tours. I went out to high schools. I helped with dual credit. There was just, I felt like I was making a really big impact there. And we really saw our enrollment numbers jump during the time that I was there. So that was just really nice to see that we were actually making an impact, and I felt like I was doing something good for students. My second job was actually as the program manager for outreach and recruitment here. So I'm the old Raymond Craft. And here I had a wonderful team, and one of them is actually in here today. And that was an incredible opportunity. And because it was a management position, it gave me the opportunity to learn a lot of things about administration and how administration works in higher education, because it works very, very differently from any other kind of business. And then I was very fortunate to receive the opportunity to take this position that I have currently as the director over at our system office, and now I'm mainly working with equity initiatives, and I love doing that. So again, my goal has always been to now my goal has been to help students to succeed and to get better, to better themselves, and to give them better opportunities to get through college, because I felt like I had a really great college experience, and so my goal now is to help students to have just as good of a role. Unanticipated challenges. Okay, so do any of you in here have a family member or relative that's disabled? Yeah, we have a few. So this is my dad. He is diabetic, and he lost his vision a few years ago. So I ended up moving him in with me when I was 24, and now take care of him. So this was something that just kind of came out of nowhere. Well, we sort of saw it coming, but he does not want to go to the doctor, and it's really difficult to get, well, typically, in my experience with my family, Mexican males don't want to go to the doctor. And that's been my dad's mentality this whole time, and people tell them to take care of themselves, and I see you shaking your head, so you know what I'm talking about, and they won't go, and it's really difficult. So moved him in with me, and this was when I was in the middle of my master's program. So I was dealing with school and work, and then we had this on top of it. And with that supervisor that I mentioned previously that wasn't understanding of my needs to take care of my father, that just, again, wasn't going to cut it. And then in my family, because diabetes runs really heavily, I have a lot of other family members that are now having issues. So I had an aunt recently that had to have surgery for something, and then my uncle's got something going on with his vision. So, and again, because we're so closely rooted in family, we want to take care of each other. So I try to be there for them as much as I can. And a lot of times it's just really hard to balance that, trying to be there for your family, trying to, have your own life and have your own family and your goals and work towards your aspirations, and then also doing everything else that comes along with it. So it can be really difficult, but whenever you have challenges come up like that, you just got to stay positive and push through it. There's no other way. So some of the key points and advice that I would give you all, the first one is to never forget where you come from and know your reality. So by know your reality, I mean, what situation are you really in? What is your current state? You need to be honest with yourself about that. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Identify those and harness your strengths and work on your weaknesses, or see how you can turn your weakness into a strength. Negative things happen. How you respond is up to you. Again, like I said about my dad's situation, that's something that I really can't control. You just have to kind of roll with the punches. But how I handled that situation made all the difference, because if I just kind of said, okay, well, you're on your own, first of all, what would that say about me? And how would that say about how I handle things? That I just run away from my problems and I don't care about my family? Next one is, as long as you're breathing, it's never too late to change your mind about your career. That is my philosophy. So don't ever feel like just because you're kind of far in a program, if you're really not feeling it and you don't want to do it, don't do it. There's ways that you can find. I think if once you find out what your passion is, you need to find a way to make money doing that. So my passion, I found out, is helping students succeed and giving them opportunities to grow. So I found a way to make money doing it. People who love to sing, be a singer, do something. You don't necessarily have to be, Justin Timberlake or whoever, but sing at church, do something. Next one is have a really strong support system. This one I think is really important when it comes to student organizations. The stronger your support system is, and as long as you have a positive support system, the better your outcome is going to be, because you have people that are there to support you and they're going to be in there for you, whatever you need. And the last one is be positive, laugh often, and love people. So through everything, you just have to be positive. You've got to laugh with people, make sure you're having a good time, and you have to love people. Yeah. And that's it.